Hi everyone. This episode's going to come with a content warning. Our conversation covers some dark topics including rape, suicide, and infanticide in biblical and archaeological contexts. Feel free to skip this one if you need to. Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where three atheists talk about the Bible and possibly alienate other Christian listeners. Is that what we're doing in this episode?
I think that's what my thought was watching it, yeah. I'm gonna get in trouble.
Was this what happened in the last episode?
No,
didn't you watch Year One? Did you watch the right Year One movie?
Oh, right, yes. Yeah, okay, got you.
It's all about the Bible. It's not really about the Stone Age at all.
No.
My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth. I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plump. I study bioarchaeology, health and disease, and human evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett. I study ancient DNA.
And today we're reviewing Year One from 2009, starring Jack Black and Michael Cera. And as we've revealed, it starts off in the Stone Age, but it very quickly turns into a movie that's all about the Bible, particularly the book of Genesis. So who wants to summarize this movie?
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put air quotes around this. It's a comedy, but I did not laugh once all the way through it, which is a real shame because I really like all the actors in it. I like Jack Black. I like Michael Cera. I love Harold Ramis, who kind of wrote and directed it, and it's his last film, which I think is a real kind of blot on his kind of pretty good record. Anyway, so it starts, and you instantly know it's going to be terrible when you see Vinnie Jones is in the opening credits as a named actor. So that kind of calibrated my expectations. But it starts off with two guys played by Jack Black and Michael Cera who are living in a kind of Stone Age-ish tribe. And Jack Black is a hunter, and Michael Cera is a gatherer. But Jack Black is a terrible hunter, and Michael Cera is a terrible gatherer. And they're kind of ruled over by a big, strong alpha male who gets to mate with all the women and hunt all the animals and push everyone around. And they kind of get annoyed at this, and then they eat from the forbidden tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which should be familiar to anyone with a kind of classical education or even kind of a faint familiarity with the Old Testament. And then they kind of get banished from the tribe. And so they leave. The first people they meet are Cain and Abel. And so they're there to witness the first murder where Cain kills Abel, which is great. They meet Adam, who is played by Harold Ramis. And then, they kind of move from biblically inspired catastrophe to catastrophe. They end up getting sold as slaves. They kind of meet other people from their tribe that have been sold into slavery. They end up in a kind of unnamed Roman town, I think, working as slaves. They also meet Abraham, the kind of biblical father, just as he's about to sacrifice Isaac. They're almost the first people to bear witness to the new covenant between the God of the Old Testament and this chosen people, but they run away from that as well. They kind of blunder from accident to accident, none of which are particularly amusing, and then it ends up with them kind of fighting their way out of slavery, rescuing their beloveds from slavery too, and living kind of happily ever after. I think that's about it, really. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in with anything else that they liked or didn't like.
I think that's a good summary. I'll agree. It's not a good movie, and it certainly doesn't have good reviews online. But I actually like it. I think it's funny. Like it's stupid. It's not the best movie of anybody who is in this movie. But I did laugh. I've seen it more than once, and I enjoyed the humor. I think it really comes down to whether or not you like this sort of entirely improvised style that's characteristic of Judd Apatow and some of these other actors. But I'll agree that it's it's not like a very tightly written comedy or anything. It's very, very improvised.
Yeah, I chuckled a few times, but nothing really laugh out loud.
I think that the closest I came to a laugh was when Michael Cera's hung upside down in the prison, and he needs the toilet, and he just goes, and it goes in his mouth. I mean, that was the highest brow laugh that almost came. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of premise is there for what could be a really funny film, like a kind of jokey look at the kind of Old Testament would be great, because it's such a weird book that there's so much there that can be kind of mined for laughs, but they just didn't manage to do it. I think maybe if Mel Brooks or somebody with maybe a kind of better handle on that kind of comedy had done it, it could have been a really, really funny film, especially with the kind of cast that they had, who were great. I mean, they had, Paul Rudd and Jack Black and all these other kind of top-notch actors. Juno Temple's in it as well. I mean, she's great too. So yeah, it's a frustrating watch, I think.
I was brushing up on some of my Book of Genesis, going over my notes, and the stories in Genesis are so ridiculous that it's almost like you could do a faithful retelling of the Book of Genesis and have a much better comedy than the actual story that they wrote for this movie.
Yeah, there are some strange parts for sure.
I don't know, everything I know about the Bible I learned from The Simpsons, so this all lined up pretty well.
Hank Azaria, who does a lot of voices on The Simpsons, plays Abraham in this, which I really like. I really like the way he played Abraham. It was his lust for foreskins was. I thought that was very funny. So let's start off as usual by picking away the little. I mean, normally it's scientific inaccuracies, but I guess a lot of these could be biblical inaccuracies if we have enough knowledge of the Bible to do that. To sort of start on as a tradition for us, we can look at some of the animals, because there are a few animals in this. Did you notice that, Ross?
Yeah, I did. I've noted down that we've got wild boar, we've got an albino python, we've got, I think, jackals, a puma, Highland cows, lion. So that's very much a kind of non-specific geography. I mean, I think it's just whatever was cheap at the kind of animal handlers that week, because there's no place where you'd ever find all those things together, really.
It was filmed in the United States, in the Southwest, I think. So I guess the answer is that if you want to find all those animals in one place, you do that in the United States.
Yeah.
In Hollywood.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say my first thing with the why it's called year one, because isn't year one when Jesus was born?
Yeah.
So, but Jesus never showed up in this, so isn't this actually like year minus 50 or something?
No, I think so. I mean, if we're looking at kind of biblical chronology, then we're talking like Bishop Ussher kind of stuff. Then year one is 4004 BC. That's when the world is made according to his kind of chronology. When you add up all the begats and the begottens, then that was kind of how it was worked out. And so I think obviously this is coming from this is not a film that has anything to do with Jesus. He's not part of this.
I thought he was going to show up at some point, but he didn't.
No. But yeah, I guess year one would be when Adam is born. But Adam appears as an old man in this, and he's got Cain and Abel and Lilith and all his other kids. So yeah, why it's called year one? It's a good question still.
Yeah, so it's like year 65 then or something.
Yeah. Well, Adam lives a long time, so.
Yeah, it's definitely impossible to sort out an actual chronology, because it's completely inconsistent as far as the Bible goes. I'm pretty sure that everything from this movie that's from the Bible is entirely from the Book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. I don't think there was anything from the New Testament or even any other books of the Bible at all, were there?
There's definitely nothing from the New Testament. I mean, it's very much a kind of retelling of stories from the Torah. It's not New Testament at all. So I think there's the kind of first 5 books of the Bible would be, Genesis, Exodus, but there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing beyond Genesis. There's nothing really about Exodus in there.
And so you have Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, but then you also have Abraham later on. So Adam is an old man, and Cain and Abel are, Paul Rudd and David Cross, which is excellent. But they're the age of Paul Rudd and David Cross in 2009, which would be like, 40s. How old would they be around then?
Well, who knows? I mean, Paul Rudd is ageless, so it could be
he is.
True.
Anywhere from 20 to 60.
Yeah. But regardless, Abraham, played by Hank Azaria, is definitely an old man when we meet him. But Abraham is a direct descendant of Adam through Cain, or I don't know the lineages here, but definitely Adam is a great-great-great-grandfather of Abraham, and Abraham is roughly the same age as Adam in this movie. So I kind of feel like they took the Old Testament and put it in a blender and then just sort of pasted it all back together for this movie. It's all there, but it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the patriarchs are all supposed to have lived for 500 plus years. I mean, it's not just Methuselah that's very old lived. Adam and Abraham and all these other guys get into their multiple hundreds. So
Did you say Medusa?
Methuselah.
Oh, God. I was like, Medusa's in the Bible? Maybe I'll read it.
Yeah, I slept through that bit.
Yeah.
No, Methuselah, as in as old as Methuselah.
Something that I read online is that Noah was also supposed to be in this, but that scene was cut because the movie Evan Almighty had just come out before this and flopped, where Evan Almighty was the sequel to Bruce Almighty, where Steve Carell plays Noah, and there's, it's a modern retelling of Noah's Ark, but that movie had flopped, so they cut the whole Noah's Ark scene from this movie. But it was supposed to be there in the original script.
Who was going to be Noah? Do we know?
I didn't read that. I'm not sure.
I was surprised Moses didn't show up.
Yeah, that's true. So we have Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Seth, who was their third son, but they also have Lilith in this as Adam and Eve's daughter. And I don't think Lilith was actually in the Bible, but in the stories where Lilith exists, I thought that she was Adam's first wife, at least according to the Jewish tradition.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Is there any story where Lilith is Adam and Eve's daughter, or is that entirely made up?
Not that I know of. I think that's entirely made up.
Wait, you said Lilith was Adam's first wife?
Yeah, that's not in the Christian Bible, but in some apocryphal texts or something like that.
Because Eve was the first woman, right?
The story is that Adam and Lilith were both individually made out of clay, and Lilith was not a good subservient wife to Adam, so she was banished, and God made Eve out of Adam's rib so that she could be a good subservient woman. Which is not in the Christian Bible, but that's some mythology tied into all of those stories somehow.
Have we talked before? I can't remember if we have, about the idea that, I think we have maybe talked about the kind of interesting idea that when the Bible talks about a rib, it's kind of non-specific enough that they could be talking about a baculum. Have we discussed that before?
I don't think we have, but I think I've heard that.
Yeah, so I mean the baculum. I mean, I'm not a bone morphology person, but the baculum is a bone that's found in the penises of most mammals, including our kind of close relatives. But it doesn't appear in humans. So it could be that people that would have been very familiar with skeletons back in the past would have noticed that lots of other mammals had a bone in the penis department, whereas humans didn't, and that could be part of an explanation for that.
And they're generally just kind of, depending on the size, just kind of rod-shaped. So you could see how, if you don't know, it could look like ribbish, right?
Yeah.
I have
certainly
a 3D...
Some of the carnivore... You have a 3D what, Kim?
Glow-in-the-dark printed fox baculum on my bookshelf.
Well, I mean, definitely some of the carnivore ones like foxes and raccoons and even some of the sea mammals, their baculums are kind of rib-like. I'm thinking here of like a walrus baculum, which is a fairly impressive and sizable bone.
Hmm.
But the kind of raccoon and possum bacula are sizable kind of rib-sized bones.
So he gave her the rib.
Yes, I guess that's how you. I mean, that's just one interpretation, but it's interesting. You still hear today people claiming that the fact that, as a fact, that men have one less rib than women because it was taken out of them, which is nonsense.
Right.
People have
That is that
males
is not
and females have the same number of ribs, though
Yes.
occasionally you will get more or less just from kind of human variation.
Yes, but that's not. You wouldn't even notice if you had that.
Yeah.
At this point, maybe we can shout out the Phallological Museum in Iceland.
Oh yeah, that's
Which I've
awesome.
Heard of that?
Yeah, I've
Which
been
I've
there.
been to. Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, it
My
was really
parents,
interesting.
I think, went when they went to Iceland, but it was closed on the day that they tried to go.
Oh no.
You go all the way to Iceland to see a museum of penises and it's closed. I mean, that's
Oh.
terrible.
Well, there's also the necromancer pants in Iceland. So there's these pants that are supposed to be made out of human flesh, and they were worn by witches or made by witches back in the day. Like Icelandic witchcraft is very big, and they're kept in the witchcraft museum somewhere up north. And I was up north, so I was like, okay, I really want to see these pants. It sounds like so gross and cool. So it was winter. And I drove, it was 3 hour there and 3 hour back. So 6 hour round trip I drove.
Oh, God.
And they're rubber. And they're not
What?
even good rubber. They're just thick, crappy rubber. The feet don't even have like separate toes, with just weird fake hair kind of glued splotchily on it. Like if a child was trying to put a fake beard on. I was
Oh my
so
God.
disappointed. I almost cried.
Did you complain?
No, I just laughed quietly. But
Ah.
6
they claim it's real.
hours.
Yeah.
I know.
They say
no, it's
that
not.
they're real.
I know.
Oh, that's really disappointing.
I know. So I probably just ruined
'Cause
their
the story's
tourism there.
The story's nuts, though, isn't it? The necropants, they're supposed to be that you have to take a kind of dying man and flay his lower half, and then wear the skin as trousers, and then gold coins will appear in the scrotum or something. I mean, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
Is that
I
not
was
the
really
story?
looking forward to
Oh.
seeing it. I think so, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, so that's one of the biggest disappointments of my life. Not the biggest, but it's up there. It's on the list.
Oh dear. So yeah, I mean, there's not really much to discuss in terms of kind of archaeology. They have a few
I know.
stone tools, which I couldn't identify to time period.
They
I
just
don't know if
looked like-
Josh or Kim.
No. I mean, they were pretty big, heavy spearheads.
Mm.
They looked kind of more just like what you would make a fake spearhead to look like. The houses, though, that they had, the shelters that were just like tents made of sticks, that was funny because it supplied no shelter, and they're all just little like cocoons that they each had of the sticks, which I don't think that's how, because you're still just exposed. There was no, you could walk between the sticks, so I don't think that was very accurate.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of Stone Age archaeology in this. It's really all
No.
biblical archaeology, which is not a field that I remotely specialize in.
Mm.
I did look up a lot of things because of that. In addition to all the names from the Bible, did you notice there's a lot of names that just come from sort of general Mesopotamian or Sumerian history or mythology?
They mentioned Gilgamesh, I think, at one point. Did they? That was the only kind of one I picked
Well,
up on.
the names of the characters in this movie are a weird mishmash because your main characters seem to just have really sort of basic kind of caveman names. Like Michael Cera and Jack Black are named Zed and O, and their love interests are named Maya and Ima, which don't seem to mean anything. They just seem to be short, grunty caveman names.
Mm-hmm.
And then the big bad caveman is named Marlak, which I couldn't find that a reference to anything. But his sort of sidekick is named Enmabaragesi, which I'm like, this name is so specific, it has to be something, right? So Enma-Bada was a Sumerian king, a real historical Sumerian king. I don't know anything about him, but I looked up the name, and that's what it tells me. And there's also a lot of other characters that have names from Sumeria. So there was Princess Inanna, played by Olivia Wilde. Inanna is actually the name of the Sumerian goddess of love, beauty, sex, war, justice, and political power.
That's quite a portfolio.
Yeah. So we have a mix of names from Sumerian history and also Sumerian mythology. We also have the leader of the guard in Sodom was named Sargon, which would be a reference to one of 3 different Akkadian rulers, Sargon of Akkad, or Sargon the First, or Sargon the Second, who I believe were named after the original Sargon. And of course, none of these characters have anything to do with their historical or mythological counterparts. They just seem to have taken these names from history books and just applied them willy-nilly to these characters, which is it's kind of fun. I don't really have a problem with that for this movie, right?
No. What I enjoyed was they were listing people, and it was all biblical names, and then they threw in a Jennifer in there. I enjoyed that.
There's another character named Zoftig the Eunuch, played by Kyle Gass, who is Jack Black's partner in the band Tenacious D. I looked up the name Zoftig because it sounded kind of German to me.
It's Yiddish, isn't it? For chunky?
Yeah, it's Yiddish.
Like chubby?
Yeah, voluptuous or plump. Which
great
makes sense because that describes Kyle Gass.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with the Bible or Sumerian history, so it's interesting how they chose to name all their characters here.
I thought Olivia Wilde's English accent was actually pretty good, though I don't really know why she decided to go with an English accent, but she committed to it fully. It was quite convincing.
Which one is she, the princess?
The princess, yeah, with the English accent.
Well, I guess that just sounds royal, right?
That's a funny thing that they do in movies where I'd like to have your perspective, Ross, being from the UK, but in American movies, when they want to make something sound old, they just give them all English accents, whether they're ancient Greece or ancient Rome. It doesn't matter where they're from. If they want them to sound old and fancy, they give them an English accent. And so it's kind of funny the way they did it in this movie because I like the way the conceit they used in this movie is where everybody just speaks normal, like American English. And I like that sort of contrast for the use of comedy to like have people talking in modern slang, like 2,000 years in the past. But then some of the characters have English accents if they need to feel like fancy or important. And in the case of Olivia Wilde, going so far as to do a fake English accent when all of the other American characters just have American accents. So it's a kind of funny thing. Yeah.
I mean, it is weird because it's not even like it's not a particularly posh English accent. I think that she does. It's it's not upper class English. It's just sort of a generalized nondescript English
Southern
accent, which isn't particularly old or fancy.
No,
but
to North Americans, it sounds fancy.
But it did sound good. I mean, it wasn't like a Kevin Costner in Robin Hood or something like that. It was actually fairly convincing.
But you sound fancy to us, Ross. Like it's a fancy accent.
What?
Yeah.
No.
Like, I wouldn't have been able to tell if her accent was good or not until you told me. So, okay. I mean, it depends on what you're used to, I guess.
I thought she was English, so I guess it was good. I mean, it's the same thing if you want someone to be the bad guy, you make them German or Russian sounding, right?
Or English. I mean, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah,
as well.
English too.
I mean, maybe it's me speaking as a Scotsman. It's strange to, obviously they're trying to make her a sympathetic character because she's one of the good guys. But
I kept waiting for her to become bad, though.
Yeah. Well, she does try and trick them, doesn't she, when she kind of tries to get Jack Black to go into the Holy of Holies. But yes, I mean, I'm more used to the bad guys in films that I watch have English accents rather than the good guys.
One of the things I latched onto in terms of historical accuracy is the armor, because that's a thing that could be an archaeological artifact. So there's, a lot of evidence we could look into. But of course, I don't really know anything about armor because there's not really Stone Age armor. So I did a little bit of research and I decided, as far as I can tell, that the helmets that they're wearing, that the soldiers in the city of Sodom are wearing, are an ancient Greek style. Did the armor feel like as an ancient Greek style to you guys?
Yeah, it wasn't quite Roman, which I thought that they kind of, my assumption was that they went Roman and then changed it just a little bit to make it so it wasn't Roman. But yeah, I could see that being Greek with the pointy nose coming down, like kind of a Spartan type thing.
Yeah, of course the armor is not historically accurate, but it's definitely, I think it's based on a style that would be called Chalcidian or Attic, which developed out of the Chalcidian. And it makes sense that it sort of is like kind of Roman, kind of Greek, because this is the style that would have spread into Italy and would have influenced the Roman styles later. So it is sort of a somewhere between Roman and Greek style of helmet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's out of place because this movie is pretty clearly set in Israel. And Hank Azaria says pretty much exactly that because he describes exactly the land which God bestowed upon the Hebrew people. And he describes the area he describes as modern day Israel, which probably comes directly out of the Bible as far as I know. And they end up in the city of Sodom for a good part of the movie, which is described as being in that region. So we shouldn't be seeing Greek or Roman armor from, 500 BCE in the biblical Middle East or Near East.
The original Bible Belt.
Yeah.
The original Bible Belt.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I don't think we have armor from that time period. So it would be a guess on what it looked like.
I don't know, but there's a lot of Sumerian like carvings and things like this where we can see depictions of how soldiers would have been dressed. But again, I don't know anything about that.
So this movie is not our area of expertise. One thing that I would say is that I was quite surprised with having 3 somewhat main female characters. I don't think this passed the Bechdel test.
No. It's a very male-centric sort of humor.
But yeah, what do you expect?
Yeah, well,
what do you expect from a film based on the Bible? I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There's when she said, "Oh, what if God's a woman?" Then he just,
yeah. That was quite kind of self-knowing. That was I did appreciate that.
Yeah, but out of all the movies we've watched, only one passed the Bechdel test so far, right? Which was the last one that Ross you missed, The Descent.
Oh, you watched The Descent without me?
Yeah.
The proper scary film. Oh, it's...
Yeah.
You
got to listen to the episode.
Yeah, I'll have to now.
But yeah, so that one passed the Bechdel test, but I don't think any other movie has. Not even Ice Age.
No. Ice Age definitely not, because there's no main female characters. California Man, no.
No.
Neanderthal Man, definitely not.
No. None.
No.
This is, just the one. That's bad.
Mm-hmm. It is bad.
And it's not something that you even really notice until it gets pointed out, and then you're just like, wow. Like, and to me, the requirements to pass that test seem so minimal that you would assume a lot of movies would easily pass it without trying. What is it? 2 women talk to each other
about something that's not a man.
About something that's not a man.
Yeah. That is a very low hurdle to pass.
I know. And in this movie, I don't think the women ever talk to each other. They stood beside each other.
They don't. They only ever talk to the men. Even
the men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. This movie does technically pass the Bechdel test because Olivia Wilde, when she and the other 2 woman characters are about to be sacrificed, Olivia Wilde offers a cup of some sort of anesthetic to the other women and says, drink this and you won't feel anything. They talk to each other and they're not talking about a man. They're talking about dying.
Okay.
So technically,
is there a length of time they're supposed to talk to each other, or is it just any?
No, I think
I don't think there is.
No.
Okay.
Wow. So that does.
So this one squeaks by,
but not well.
No. Oh god.
Wow.
And it's really sad because the 3 actresses, June Dan, Raphael, Juno Temple, and Olivia Wilde, are all really good. actors, when they're given a chance with something to work with, they're all really good. They could have had a lot more rather than being what they are in this film.
Everybody was in this film.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be hilarious. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even as I was watching it, I was like, I don't even have any opinions on it. I don't know how we're going to get a podcast out of this. I hope Ross is angry about something.
Yeah, well, I was quite angry from the start when I saw they're eating like enormous strawberries, which are clearly,
domesticated.
That's not.
Yeah.
Wild strawberries are like the size of a full stop. They're like absolutely tiny.
Yeah.
So that annoyed me. And because I really love Harold Ramis, I kind of felt annoyed all the way through that this was his last film, that it was such a turkey, considering he's done so many great things.
A lot of movies that try and do biblical stuff end up failing, though. Even if they do it seriously or jokingly, I don't know if it's just too much to handle, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Bruce Almighty. I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, I liked Bruce Almighty. I liked the Noah Almighty too, or whatever that one was.
The Evan Almighty one.
Evan Almighty, yeah, to laugh, to turn your brain off and laugh. My favorite kind of thing for the Bible is the book, Christopher Moore's book, Lamb. Have you read it? Oh my God, Ross,
no.
you would like it. It's Christopher Moore, so he's a comedy writer. So he writes really weird stories, little comedy, quite like you'll laugh out loud if you like his style. And Lamb is his most popular book, and it takes place. So you know how the Bible starts when Jesus is born, and then it skips up until he's 30. So the
New
years
Testament,
between.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, but there's 30 years of his life that is not covered or whatever, and so this book is supposed to be those 30 years.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a coming of age story for Jesus, and it's told by his best friend Biff. So it's the Chronicles of Biff or whatever. What's the what do they call it? The Gospel according to Biff.
Okay. Is Biff a properly Sumerian or Mesopotamian or correctly attributed name?
It's a nickname.
I think not.
They gave him a correct name, but Biff is a nickname, and so it's comedy. And my religious friend was very offended by it, but
that's a great recommendation.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Definitely, because this is what good stories should deal with, is subverting expectations. And when you have stories that are so well known, like the Old Testament and New Testament stories in kind of Western culture, there's sort of ripe for sort of switching around. That's why I guess sort of Life of Brian by Monty Python is so kind of respected. And again, it got a lot of flack when it came out, but it does treat the actual biblical stories quite respectfully, but it does different things with them and makes it funny. That might be one for the list as well, because they go to a lot of archaeological sites, and there's definitely some scope for maybe for a podcast there. But
let's add it to the list.
I have a couple of books that are sort of biblical. One that I quite liked was called Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock, which is where, I'm trying to remember it now, I think it's where a guy goes back in time. I think he's a priest, and he somehow goes back in time and he meets the biblical Jesus and discovers that he is, he's kind of, what would be the word? I'm trying to think of a kind of polite way to say this, but he's not mentally all there when he discovers him. And so this priest that's gone back in time essentially takes over the role of Jesus and does all the things that are described in the Bible, because he's studied it his whole life. And it's quite a nice kind of, I guess, a kind of Ouroboros kind of story where it kind of forms a closed loop, which is quite cool.
Right. I think neurodivergent is the word.
Yes, that would be the better word. But yeah, that's not how it's described in the book.
Right. Yeah, you've got to read Lamb. I personally wouldn't have found Lamb offensive because it makes Jesus out to be kind of more of just a person who grew up learning through his mistakes and stuff. But I don't know. But I'm not religious, so I wouldn't find it offensive.
Well, that sort of sounds like the kind of same sort of controversy that things like The Last Temptation of Christ and other anything that tries to humanize Jesus as a person rather than as a kind of son of God kind of thing. It's not. There's people that are able to deal with that, and people that just can't. And I think that, definitely there's room for that to be done, because I mean, if you speak to any proper theologian, then that's a really interesting aspect of the kind of New Testament stories, is about Jesus as human, and there's a lot of scope for stories to be told about that.
Hmm. Well, I think my friend, her point was that she was mostly offended because when people take her God or Lord as a character,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, I guess humanize them, or even maybe dilute them even away from, like, not below human, but even dilute them more to their character, not just even just human. I don't know. So she probably would hate this movie.
Well, it's certainly a kind of discussion that's very current when you see, with how other religious groups or prophets and holy people are depicted in popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very sensitive discussion.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
wasn't
I
that
think,
journalist murdered for the cartoon that he drew?
well, yeah, lots of
Years
people have been
ago.
murdered for cartoons that have been drawn.
Yeah, a religious cartoon, and he was murdered
Yeah,
for it.
but I mean, it's interesting that definitely that has mostly, not entirely, but mostly disappeared from Christianity, just because of things like Life of Brian and Last Notation of Christ, and other kind of biblically inspired art forms that have
Mm-hmm.
kind of pushed the boundary a little bit, and not resulted in too much discomfort for viewers.
Interesting. I guess we should have gotten somebody religious as a guest.
Yeah. We
It would
should
be
have.
good if we do Life of Brian or something like that to find a biblical archaeologist to have
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But I do have a topic we can use to move into some more science-y stuff here. Are you guys aware of this recent paper from about a month ago talking about evidence for the destruction of a real-life city of Sodom?
Yeah.
No, I missed that.
So most of this movie takes place in the city of Sodom, which is in the Bible. There's Sodom and Gomorrah, which are wicked cities which God destroys with fire from heavens or something like that. The actual story of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis is probably worth retelling because it's so much more interesting than the story of this movie, which is that Sodom and Gomorrah are a really wicked place, and so God wants to destroy them, so he sends 2 angels to Sodom. I don't know if he sends them directly to the house of Lot, who is like the only virtuous man in the city. And so Lot takes these 2 angels in, and then a mob shows up at his house, demanding that he send the angels outside because they want to rape them. And so Lot says, "No, these are our guests. Here, have my 2 daughters instead." And the mob
my
doesn't want
God.
that. And then yada, 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 and then God destroys the city. Lot and his family escape, and God tells them not to look back, but his wife looks back, and she turns into a pillar of salt. And that's the story.
Wow. I think if I sent my angels to a city to save it and they raped them, yeah, I'd probably burn it down too.
Right.
Like, that's...
So that's the story. The paper is this is from September 20th of this year, published in Scientific Reports. A Tunguska-sized airburst destroyed Tal el Hammam, a Middle Bronze Age city in the Jordan Valley near the Dead Sea. So Tunguska was an asteroid that hit Siberia in the early 20th century. And so basically what they're saying here is they have an archaeological city of Tal el Hammam, and they're suggesting that there's evidence of, they call it a cosmic airburst, and they're citing some astrophysicist or astronomer or somebody who studies that kind of thing. And so the idea is basically that an asteroid came in and exploded in the sky, and there's a destruction level that they can identify archaeologically where the city was destroyed, and you have evidence of high temperatures, like melted shocked quartz, they say, and like other melted like spherules of things in like the pottery and stuff like that.
But this was in Siberia?
The Tunguska is in Siberia. This archaeological city they're excavating is in Jordan. So it's right in the place where the Bible says Sodom and Gomorrah would be.
Right.
And so it's a pretty interesting idea for this paper, and it's a really long paper. They present a lot of evidence, but it very quickly started getting picked apart online and started getting a lot of criticism. So, Ross, are you familiar with the problems that people were picking apart in it?
No, I mean, I saw the kind of controversy from the sidelines just watching it online, but I didn't download the paper, and I didn't read through it, and I didn't assess the kind of strength of evidence for or against. Though, I mean, I know a little bit about the Tunguska event from 1908, and that's hugely powerful, interesting thing that happened, and for sure, if that had happened over a populated area, then it would have caused some serious damage. But
and then you could see if that would then go into lore, right?
for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of definitely stay away from biblical archaeology. That's just not something I'm interested in at all, particularly because of the amount of special pleading that goes on trying to identify real archaeological places with stuff that's in the Bible. I'm much happier to read it if I read it as mostly allegory rather than history, which I think is a much safer way to do it.
There might be some basis in history, but to interpret it, I think you would have to be an atheist to be able to looking at it without a religious scope, so that you're not bringing in your own bias.
Well, I think
right?
the problem with biblical archaeology is that it doesn't tend to attract many atheists to it.
No, I know.
But no, I hadn't read into it. Josh, have you read into it? Do you have any kind of comments?
Yeah, well, I was following some discussions on Twitter, and I've glanced through the parts of the paper where my expertise would allow me to actually understand it. So there's a few arguments here. First of all, the authors they're not saying it's literally the city of Sodom that was destroyed by God. They're saying, Kim, like you say, there is an event that might have happened which would have permeated the culture and mythology and been the inspiration for the biblical story of Sodom, which is not a crazy idea because that kind of thing happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of the main criticism is that they're citing a lot of astrophysics or whoever with the scientists would be that study asteroids and meteorites and things like this. I'm not sure what field that would be exactly.
Geologists?
But they're I'm not sure, but they're citing some author who studies cosmic airbursts, and he started to weigh in on Twitter saying you're citing me wrong. You're not understanding what I'm talking about.
Oh,
so
dear.
I'm not qualified to comment on that, and I can just sit, like you say, Ross, sit on the sidelines with my popcorn. Another problem is when you look into the credentials of the authors, the last author on this paper, and also there's another author who doesn't seem to be an author on the paper, but is affiliated with the last author. Like, I don't remember if one's the mentor of the other or something like this. They're affiliated with, let me get this right here, Trinity Southwest University in Albuquerque. Are you guys familiar with that university?
Is that the one just beside the Payless shoe source?
Yeah, I think so. It's in between like two fast food places and a strip mall.
Yeah.
It's an unaccredited evangelical school in, I think it's in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
So just a money pit.
Yeah. And then these two authors as well, they've both been pushing this idea, like this isn't a brand new site. They've been excavating it for a long time, and they've already published books trying to suggest that this is the biblical city of Sodom, and also just very non-scientific, very Christian books. So, like you say, Kim, it's going to be really hard for them to not have a biased perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't know anything about how quartz and other minerals react to heat, so I have no idea how to interpret the things they're saying. The one thing that I can interpret is that they have a section called Human Bones in the Destruction Layer. And so, Kim, you and I would be able to comment on that. They definitely have human bones that they've excavated from this layer. But one of the things that they say They say this in the abstract, okay? Basically, they're describing this explosion which destroyed the city. It knocked over walls, it set things on fire, and they say they have a broad archaeological layer where they have evidence of this extreme heat and explosion. And this explosion, according to their abstract, caused extreme disarticulation and skeletal fragmentation in nearby humans. So they're basically saying that they have evidence that this thing exploded in the sky, destroyed the city, basically disintegrated humans where they stood, and then we have these disintegrated human bodies in this destruction layer. And I feel like that is really stretching an interpretation. Like,
yes.
You can find burnt human remains in a layer, but to put this all together, I think it's a stretch.
Are they burnt human remains or just fragmented?
I think some of them are burnt, but when we look into what the remains actually are, they're actually quite sparse. The record indicates that most of the bones had been shattered into small pieces and mixed into a matrix of pulverized mud bricks. Currently, it is not possible to determine if the small bones are from humans or small animals, but their proximity to identifiable human bones makes it most likely that they are human.
That doesn't make them most likely to be human at all.
Absolutely not.
So, pulverized into the rock, does that mean that they were grinding using animal bone as part of the filler for building materials? Or is that saying that the meteorite pulverized them?
I think the mud bricks are from structures and the meteorite pulverized them, so we have this layer of rubble from when the city was destroyed. And so we have human or animal bones mixed into this layer of a destroyed city.
Right. So if that were the case, there'd be a lot of bones unless the city was evacuated. Wouldn't be some bones. And then if it was hot enough and a big enough explosion to manipulate quartz, I don't think that there would be very much bone left. And it would definitely be like cremains at that point, if there was any.
Well, I mean, that's the thing I can't really speak to because I don't really know what a city that was destroyed by a meteorite would look like. So I mean, it's not something that's commonly reported on.
Yes, that's true. But I mean, if you're thinking about cremation, you put a body in a crematorium oven that gets up to like 600 degrees or something like that, 1,000 degrees. I don't know. I'm just pulling those numbers out of my ass, but like really hot. It takes hours to burn down. And then even then at the end of that cremation, there's still giant chunks of bone that they then have to break apart so that there's no, to make it into that fine dust. Like the fine dust that you get in an urn after cremation has been processed.
It's been like cement mixed, where they kind of tumble it round and round so that it breaks down. I mean,
exactly.
You kind of look at the places like Herculaneum, Pompeii, where these people were not air blasted, but like a pyroclastic flow that's come down and superheated them, and you've got evidence of their like brains boiling and their skulls exploding, but there's still like fully articulated skeletons and stuff there.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't see it. One thing that I've learned in like my forensic classes and stuff is that it's really is hard to get rid of human bodies.
Learned in your quote-unquote forensic classes.
No matter how much you try.
Yeah, well, I remember there was this one story of this man who set it up a pyre in his field. So he's in the middle of nowhere in his own field, and he set up a pyre, and he committed suicide. And the way that he did it was he shot himself with a flare gun, thereby killing himself and lighting the pyre. So he was like
a twofer,
but also being quite like so sad that he committed suicide, but really considerate, right? Like he was just dealing with everything. And then they no one checked. So there's this burning fire for 3 days in the field, and nobody really, because farmers burn stuff, it doesn't really matter. And then eventually on the third day they were like, okay, well, this is getting weird now. And they went to check it out, and they still found enough of him to be able to identify him as who it was. So that's 3 days of intense burning. So I think I think there would be more evidence. To me, that sounds like just fragmented bones throughout, probably moved taphonomic processes, but I'd have to see pictures.
Yeah, if the bones are so fragmented they're unidentifiable, they probably weren't fragmented while they were still in a fleshed body, right? Like bones become brittle after the body decomposes and dry out, and then that's when they fragment like that. Yeah. But they also say it's currently not possible to determine if the small bones are from humans or small animals. That's kind of a red flag to me as well, because human bones are quite different from animals. Even infant bones, you should be able to make that assessment, and if you can't, you shouldn't say anything on it. Like, I can't tell if they're human or not, so I'm going to assume they're human.
Yeah, I mean,
you should be able to make that distinction.
You could also use something like zooms, where they just take tiny bone frags and get the protein out of it, and then it's fairly easy and cheap even to identify human versus non-human bones. I mean, it's like a couple of pounds a sample.
Yeah, zooms is zoological mass spectrometry.
And even the fact that they say you can't, fragmented bones, you can't identify it if it's small animals or humans. Well, small animals, it would be harder to mistake a larger animal, because we're not small animals. So, is that human or a rodent? Well, if you don't know,
I think they're referring to infant bones at some point. So they're trying to make the distinction between infant bones and animal bones, which is not that hard to do for a trained human osteologist.
No, I mean, it can be mistaken for bird bones if you're not a trained osteologist, but then we're going back to, if it was an infant bone during a meteoroid blast, it's going to be gone, right? Infant bones don't preserve very well under good conditions because they're so small and fragile. So for them to have survived that is probably, it could have been somebody buried an infant below the floor of their house, which happens quite often, right? You lose a baby in birth or whatever, and you want to keep it close to the home, so you bury it underneath your home, and then if something happens and the house gets knocked over or whatever and you leave, then archaeologists then find your scattered burial later. Or it was animals. Yeah.
I just as a non-archaeologist, can I just get confirmation from you guys that burying your dead baby under the floor is not a modern thing? That's something that happened in the past. Yeah,
it might still happen in some non-Westernized cultures. I mean, in South America, there's a tribe that, I don't know if they still do it, because a lot of cultures are getting Westernized, unfortunately. But they're, at least fairly recently, within the ethnographic record, if a baby died, an infant died, the mother would consume the flesh, eat the entire baby. And so we're horrified by that idea. That, that makes us very uncomfortable. But they are horrified by our idea that you would put them in the ground by themselves to be cold and alone forever. Yeah. So what they see it as is the mother is taking the baby back into her to keep it safe, to be part of her, like that it's still there inside her. So it's cultural relativism, right? So some mortuary practices, funerary, what you do with the dead is all very culturally based, and it's fashion, it's trends, it changes through time. We can even see that with how we used to, in say like European descent countries, we used to prefer burial, and now we're moving more, cremation is now the cool thing, right? So it's all very, what we might find disturbing might not be disturbing to another culture. So putting the baby under the floor, we find that very disturbing, whereas they would find it absurd to put it anywhere else, because then it's alone, it's not with you. Then there's also infanticide.
But there is evidence that people used to do that in places like the UK and France and Germany, and if you go back to, I guess, like Bronze Age, Iron Age, that kind of stuff, there's lots of houses that have human remains that have been buried in there while people were living there.
One of the most famous ones in the UK was what they have suggested, hypothesized that it was actually a brothel, and that's because of the number of infant remains found in the well and the just hidden in places around that area. In the I think the Roman type plumbing, like the latrines and all that stuff, right? And most of after doing DNA evidence, most of those skeletons actually ended up being male babies, which is the opposite of what you generally get. So, with a lot of human ways of descent, it's a male's. The firstborn male gets all your stuff, or the male gets all of it. So a lot of people would rather have a male son than a daughter, and the male could then also bring the daughter. If you get married, it's a patriarchal society. They bring the daughter into the home, so you kind of go +1. Whereas if you have a daughter, you lose her, so that's a -1 in the family. And then the men
Plus it
are
costs.
more costs. Yes, you have to pay the dowry, and then the men can help in the fields and stuff, and all this stuff. So it's a lot of times males are seen as more valuable back in that day. And since it was the males that were being the male children that seemed to be suffering from the infanticide, they thought, well, this is probably a brothel because of the number of babies that are being abandoned. And then if one of the only, situations where a female baby would actually be more beneficial and valuable to you would be in a brothel situation where you would then raise her in your lifestyle, right?
Well,
So that was their interpretation.
It's a large oof there. I mean, yeah, that's quite a lot of surmising, and not a lot of, yeah.
Well, it makes sense, and I think they knew there was a brothel in the area too.
Do you guys know this recent story from Winnipeg a few years ago where sort of cache of aborted fetuses or stillborn infants was found in a storage locker?
Yeah, that woman who was she killing them, or were they stillborn? I don't remember.
I actually don't know if there was a good resolution to that. Somebody was charged with something, but I'm not clear on what the details were.
Yeah, she had quite a number of deceased baby remains, and I think it was unclear whether all of them were killed, like died on their own, or were killed. But it seems like she just kept getting pregnant, and she stored all of them.
And decided to stop paying the storage locker. That's the craziest part of the story to me.
Yes. Well, this is when, a relative dies, and then all of a sudden you get this notification that you have to go clear out this storage unit you never knew they had. You're like, oh my God, what is in there?
Well, don't they have, I've never seen it, but isn't there a program where you can bid on unclaimed
storage lockers?
Storage lots?
Yes, yeah. Imagine it on the show, and then you get the one full of baby bodies. Horrifying.
Yeah. The shows are faked anyway. They plant stuff in there.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Sure. Yeah.
But I mean, even if you look at the patriarchal societies where women who, it's still nowadays too, where if a woman gets pregnant, it's her fault, her problem, right? Even look at the way the laws are changing, in Texas now, a woman's been put into jail for having a miscarriage. So, and then being a young unmet mother, in the UK back in the day or whatever, you would have been stigmatized and thrown out. So it might be worth your while to stay out of public eye for a while, have the baby, and then kill it and hide it in your own home where no one's going to find it, because then otherwise you might be shunned, right? I'm not saying that it happened a lot, but you can see how that would have happened. A late stage abortion, because there would be you'd get kicked out and you'd be destitute and there would be no options for you. I don't know how year one got onto this. Sorry, I'll stop talking about dead babies.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's definitely a definite link. Year one, Bible, patriarchal society, lack of abortion rights for women in places that take it seriously, like Texas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas, I'm not going to go that way.
But yeah, I would say if they found remains of an infant, then I would say that preservation in that area would be quite good. So if there was going to be a mass destruction of tons of people dead, they would find more than just the infant there. It would be more like Pompeii.
And it sounds like, if the only guy that understands the kind of astrophysical kind of story that they're trying to tell is saying you guys have got it wrong, then that sort of suggests that the whole thing falls apart.
Yes.
If you're saying a meteorite airburst killed all these people, and the guy that's an expert in meteorite airburst says actually no, then that's your story done.
Yep. The worst thing is that if these researchers have control of their site and they're trying to push their agenda for their own perspective, what they want it to be, so they're trying to fit the evidence to their story instead of trying to explain the evidence, right? If they have access to the site, and if this is an important or interesting site, other people may not have access to it, and especially not for decades, and by then it might be destroyed or so poorly excavated. I don't know how good these people are, so I can't say, but, yeah, it sucks because we may not ever really get a good interpretation of it because they're just trying to shoehorn it into their worldview.
Yeah.
Well, another bit of drama that came out from this was that the one of the lead authors created a Twitter account to respond to some criticism, and as part of his comments, it came out that they're selling potsherds from the site to tourists, and then they got a bunch of heat for selling artifacts as well.
Yeah,
So
that's number one way to find out if someone is not an archaeologist.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, I don't have a lot of expertise to comment on it, but I'll throw up a bunch of links to these Twitter conversations in the
I was
show
just going to
notes.
say, when you said that guy started a Twitter, I thought his first tweet should have been like, "Stupidity is the cornerstone of your existence."
I'll show them.
I'll show them.
So what do we think about year one, to wrap it up?
Worth skipping.
Yeah.
I mean, we hardly even talked about the movie. There was, not even enough for us to really have a conversation about.
Yeah.
I'll disagree a little, and I'll say I thought it was funny. I enjoyed it. I've seen it more than once, and I wasn't dreading having to watch it again because I think some of the jokes are funny. So maybe it depends on what style of humor you're like, but it's not a great movie. It's not one of the best ones we've ever seen.
I think it is the style of movie I generally like. I think I was just disappointed because it could have been done so well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, same. I like Judd Apatow's stuff. You know, that kind of improvisational style comedy I really like, but just and the cast they had, it should have been good, but it just wasn't. So I guess my kind of sum up would be year one, more like year none.
Oh, you've been waiting so long to say that.
I've been waiting all episode.
Bravo, that was good.
Thanks to David Bach for designing our cover art. You can see more of his work at dkbach.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out what Canadian paleoanthropologists are working on at pasc-scpa.ca.